Welcome to Study Loop.
So for this question, why don't we start out with asking ourselves, because the question is saying that some factor limits the length of food chains, why don't we ask how long food chains are typically? And I'm sure you can come up with a couple of examples on your own, but for this one I have like a pretty basic, like usually at the first level, you'll have your primary producers or your plants in a terrestrial biome, like grasses or flowers or cereals, something like that. Um, and then those are consumed by herbivores. And then herbivores are consumed by carnivores. And sometimes there might be another step in here with the omnivore, potentially. They could also be here as well. Um, and there could be a higher predator or like an apex predator who consumes this predator here, this carnivore. But typically, a food chain isn't going to be that much longer than between like 3 to 5 organisms. At some point, it becomes unsustainable. And now our question is, why might that be? And that's the question at hand in our textbook. Um, and when we get there, before we get there, let's really think about what exactly is being transferred in a food chain. And what I mean by that is, why do we eat? What do we get from food? And what do plants get from the sun? Well, energy. We eat because we need the energy that's in food, and plants undergo photosynthesis in order to get energy. Um, so at each level here of consumption, we're seeing some sort of energy transfer between trophic levels. That's what each of these stages are. And so now that we have that, let's start out with, okay, this is a transfer of energy. We know from the laws of thermodynamics that no energy transfer is totally efficient, meaning some energy is always lost as heat, or usually heat, not always, but that's the main way. So we do know that energy is going to be lost between these levels. And then we also need to think, where does this energy come from? Well, ultimately, all of the energy in the system comes from the sun. Because we're using a terrestrial biome for simplicity's sake. In this case, the primary producers take in light energy from the sun. And because they are the primary producers, they are the only organisms that can, in this ecosystem, take in energy from the sun and not from the consumptions of other organisms in order to make their own energy. This is the source of all of the energy in the system. So in this stage, technically, there should be a little bit of sunlight coming in too. And so plants get this energy from the sun. They take in light energy, and as they undergo photosynthesis, they convert that into chemical energy. And they store this chemical energy, and they use it for themselves to grow, to reproduce, to do all of the basic functions that they need to do as organisms. So that actually expends some energy. So plants get in a lot of energy. They have a high amount. And that's why herbivores like to eat them. Really, that's not like why they like to eat them, but I mean, fundamentally, that is the benefit of eating plants, is that they have a lot of energy in them. But they're not getting all of the energy that was given from the sun, because some of it was lost, either as heat, or because, inefficient exchanges, or because the plants themselves had to use up some of that energy just to live. And the same thing goes for the herbivore. This little guy has to also expend some of that energy in order to live as an organism. And in order to make up for that loss, they have to eat a lot more plants. So that means there's going to be competition at this level. So you're not going to see as many herbivores as you do see primary producers. And the same thing happens at the next level with the carnivore. He also has to expend some energy of his own, and he's only eating this animal, so he's not getting all of the energy from the sun. He's getting some energy was lost from the plant level, some has been lost with the herbivore level. So now he's like, lost even more. And because there's a limited number of animals that he can eat, there's going to be an even smaller number of carnivores in this ecosystem, just because there is this loss of energy. So there's not as much as there was at this level to go around. And that's why you don't really see that many apex predators that are like in this range right here that are only consuming, the upper level carnivores, because they have relatively little energy compared to these other stages. And so if you were only to feed off of them, you're not going to see a lot of production at this level. So now that we've covered that it's basically energy, a loss of energy between each level pretty much. Let's go to our answer choices. And when we immediately take a look at it, it seems like A is the closest to what we just described, which is low energy transfer efficiency between these trophic levels. But let's take a look at our other options just to make sure we didn't forget something or totally misrepresent what was going on. B is sort of the opposite of what's at hand here. It says there's too much net primary productivity. In that case, if there was too much NPP, there would be more than enough energy to go around in all of these trophic levels, and the food chain wouldn't be limited. So that's out. Excess assimilation is not relevant to food chains in this context, so we can go ahead and dismiss that as well. And low gross primary productivity would be the energy, like the total energy transfer rate happening at this stage, not what's available at the next levels. And that could affect, what's happening at each stage, because if that was the case, then, there wouldn't be a lot of energy available at this level. There would be even less available at this level. But it's not always the case that gross primary productivity is low. In fact, it's usually very high. So that is not really applicable in the general sense that this question is asking for, because pretty much all food chains are limited by the low efficiency of energy transfer between the trophic levels. So I think it's safe to say that A is our final